Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 59 of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So last we left off, the situation was decidedly not good. The Mad Doctor here has sort of effectively strong-armed Mustang into performing human transmutation, thus becoming the fifth sacrifice. You know, it's definitely something that occurs under duress, but nevertheless sort of, slashing Hawkeye's throat and saying, I can help her if you comply is, unfortunately effective. So I guess that's a bit of a plot twist. He was sort of, acknowledging what Hawkeye had said. Well, it's been a while since I watched this. I guess Mustang had me fooled. I guess he is more than willing to stick to his ideals. I mean, good on him. Not that this is a particularly good situation, but you have to admire that if nothing else. Now, considering that he's not going to go along with this, I feel like just sitting around talking while Hawkeye's bleeding out is probably not ideal. I mean, as it turns out, it seems like Roy has another card up his sleeve, so to speak. But yeah, I don't know, man. Time is of the essence here. So it seems like the Doctor is literally being hoisted by his own petard here. These chimeras, they were none too happy about being, transformed, I guess, and the opportunity to get revenge on the guy who did it to you is, probably too good to pass up, all things considered. Yeah, so just like that, things have turned around rather nicely. Because I believe that with the introduction of Mei Chang here, she would be able to perform the necessary alchemy to save Hawkeye. Naturally, she's going to be more interested in the Philosopher's Stone so as to secure the survival of her clan, but using a little bit to heal a friend probably wouldn't be too much of an imposition, all things considered. I mean, if nothing else, Mei Chang is certainly, what would you call it? I guess, kind-hearted enough to help. I mean, the situation sort of being framed as a choice between helping Hawkeye and getting the stone. And That's a rather kind-hearted thing to do, to immediately rush to the aid of Hawkeye. I feel like securing the stone might have, made it a bit easier, and, perhaps she could have waited, but I don't know. I don't suppose I can really fault Mei Chang for her act of selflessness here. It is notable that there are drawbacks here, because she did bleed a lot, and while the wound is healed, all that blood is still outside her body, and I seem to recall, the human body, it doesn't take a whole lot of blood loss to really impair you. Man, so it's really nice that everything turned around. But, that being said, the situation is still not particularly great considering how Father has sort of managed to wrangle the other sacrifices. And I guess now that Wrath is here, this isn't particularly good either. Yes, he's injured. Yes, those injuries aren't regenerating, but he's still dangerous, and I seem to recall Mustang had his gloves destroyed, so he's not exactly the artillery piece he was before. So, what a surprise here. We didn't actually see Wrath's corpse, so, having fallen in the water like he did, it's pretty safe to assume he wasn't actually dead. I feel like everybody sort of already made that mistake before when they blew up the train. Now, although Wrath did survive, he's certainly not in great shape, those injuries will only drag on him as time goes on, so I feel like it wouldn't take a whole lot to sort of tie him up and neutralize him. So this is interesting. Mustang himself even admits that perhaps at one point in time, he would have actually committed human transmutation to save Hawkeye. And there are people who are sort of tempering his otherwise reckless nature to prevent him from doing things like that. That's interesting because I feel like Hawkeye isn't necessarily the person who's tempering him, at least not the way Mustang was talking. Oh dear. It would seem as though things are not entirely going in Mustang and Company's way here, If I had to place money on it, I'd say it's Pride. He's decided to show up again. Yeah, there we go. It's interesting how Pride and Wrath, they're sort of really the only two left that are loyal. And they're essentially father and son, at least in appearance or in their disguise. I don't think there's any real narrative significance to it. I think it's mainly just a neat little coincidence. Ooh. I have to say, that is rather painful looking. I guess, fortunately, your hands are mostly, bones and stuff. There's a lot of, space through which things can pass through with doing little lasting damage, but man, I can't imagine that that's a an especially painless process. Now, it seems as though, even though Mustang would never willingly commit the transmutation, it seems as though Pride and Wrath are going to work together to force him to do it. This is rather unfortunate, as this essentially marks the completion of Father's plan. 5 sacrifices, he can kick the party off for real. Or at least as soon as the eclipse starts happening. I'm pretty sure he does have to wait for that. So, now that the eclipse is starting, it seems like they're really on a tight timeline here. And I do think it is notable that Pride even admits that this is sort of like a last resort. This isn't something he really wanted to do if it could be avoided, but seeing as how it can be, they have to do it. I can only assume there's going to be some sort of drawback as a result. Yeah, this is definitely not a good situation on all accounts. Wrath even sort of muses like, man, wonder what the truth is going to take for you in exchange for knowledge. Surely it's not going to be a good thing, and frankly, if Mustang's lucky, it's not going to be anything fatal. I don't think the truth tends to take things people need, strictly speaking, but I don't know, if it just sort of like hacks off one of your limbs and leaves an open wound, it's not impossible that you could bleed out as a result. I don't think the truth particularly cares too much about you if you're willing to perform such a transgression. So I feel like Wrath is playing a bit of a game here. He's saying, essentially, I'm in a weakened state. One of you guys can, in all likelihood, kill me. It seems like he's doing this to try and tie up as many people as possible and keep them away from whatever Father's doing. The idea is if he keeps everybody focused on him, he can play a bit of a sacrificial role to buy time. So, if what I'm saying about Wrath is correct and everybody sort of surmises this, the best play here would be to send, the minimal amount of people to just keep Wrath busy and then send the rest to go on ahead. But I would guess they also sort of have to wait for Mustang here. I don't know if he's necessarily going to pop out in the same place, but he's definitely going to need to be taken care of after this whole ordeal is over. Yeah, considering Mustang's history with the Elric brothers, I'd imagine there's going to be a fair few awkward questions, like, man, you gave us crap for human transmutation, now you just did it too? Well, that's another interesting thing. Father's sort of declared that Alphonse has not arrived yet. Which I guess makes sense, seeing as I was basically just the suit of armor lying around, not doing anything. Yeah. I think there's an interesting look of horror on everyone's face as they understand what's happened to Mustang. Especially even as he uses, I guess kind of like vague terms, but not the exact names. I like how they sort of, like, tiptoe around the issue without going outright and stating it, but, like, Mustang is now blind. And I don't know if I've talked about it before or if it's sort of been brought up, but there's a little bit of, I don't know what you'd call it, like dramatic irony or poetic justice in what the truth takes from everyone. I mean, Izumi Curtis, she lost, like, presumably any capacity for reproduction. Mustang, who I guess is always focused on the future and improving, he's lost his sight. He can no longer see the future that he would create. Ed Elric, lost the only family he had left. I like how Edward sort of assumes a little bit, like, Mustang, you actually did this? And it turns out, no, of course he didn't, but I don't even know if Ed was angry about the potential hypocrisy of it, but it's like, dude, do you know what you did? You landed us in a whole heap of trouble. Just after I started talking about the dramatic irony, now Father's going into it, so I guess I'm just ahead of things. I'm too smart. Man, I feel like I was, basically paraphrasing exactly what he said. The guy is now blind, he can no longer see his future. Alright, so Ed's finally getting with the program here, Forcing somebody to do something like that's a really atrocious thing to do. Because it's one thing if Mustang was like the Elric brothers and he did this entirely on his own. Even doing it under duress is questionable. But that this was done to him and now he's blind on top of that, that's a rather atrocious thing. So it would seem that Scar has decided to stay back. And I guess, in a way, it's kind of fitting. So Wrath is getting into it now, but he and Scar are sort of foils of each other. Wrath is certainly something Scar could be accused of. He's certainly an angry dude, and he's got a lot to be angry about, but at this stage in the narrative, he's sort of come to peace, I guess, with all the things that have happened. Not that he's forgiving anyone, but, he's sort of decided that maybe wanton murder is not the appropriate approach. It's also interesting that neither of them is willing to use their name or can remember their name. Scar has forsaken his name when he went down the path of vengeance, and Wrath doesn't really remember his because he might not even be the original soul of his body. I'm wondering why Alphonse is taking so long to sort of get back into his body. I guess it's because he's, looking at his body, and I'd imagine it's a rather unsettling sight to see your own flesh and blood all emaciated and sickly. So this is probably, maybe not like a test of will, but this is like a bit of a turning point for Alphonse here. If he essentially takes up his body's offer, like, that's it, accept death willingly, dab on Father's evil plan, but Alphonse might not necessarily be willing to just sort of up and die right now. But at the same time, I don't think there's too much he can do in terms of taking his own body back with him. I feel like this is almost like meant to tease him a little bit. It's like, hey, this is your body, dude, time is short. So this is an interesting conversation here. This Alphonse is essentially bound by duty here. Everybody is putting their lives on the line to fight, and he does have the opportunity to take his body back. But if he does that, he's going to be an invalid. He won't be able to do anything. So if he wants to go back and be useful, he's got to go back as he is. And, that's not something he wants to do. Although, frankly, from the audience's perspective, it might be better if Alphonse just sort of, sat tight there for a while, seeing as how he's forestalling Father's plan by not being present back in the land of the living. I mean, it's not like there's any way he could have known that to take advantage of it, but it's just, it's just a little thing, it's like, take your time, Alphonse, nobody's in any big rush. If you wait out the eclipse, then, all this probably would go to waste. It'd be pretty funny, wouldn't it, if Alphonse is just sort of waiting out the clock? Because, I don't know, we don't know all the rules of how truth in the gate works here, but if Alphonse were just determined to sit there, what could Father do about him to sort of, spur him on and get things going? I don't know, that'd be pretty funny. Father just sort of impotently mauling as Alphonse sits there talking to his own body. So ultimately, Alphonse just sort of played into Father's hands by returning. Kind of unfortunate, and even the truth sort of admits it. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.